and I'm asking for your vote.
I'm going to have a question for you, Mr. Ramaswamy. Over 10.7 million students in over 18,000 public schools nationwide have the ability to change their identity without parental notification. Governor Christie told Stewart last week that he would pass a federal law to protect parental rights. Would you try to do the same?
I have to be very clear about this. Transgenderism, especially in kids, is a mental health disorder. We have to acknowledge the truth of that for what it is. I met two young women early in this campaign.
Specifically on parental rights in schools.
Parents have the right to know. And you know what the hypocrisy of this is? Even New Hampshire failed to actually get past a piece of legislation here. The very people who say that this increases the risk of suicide are also the ones saying that parents don't have the right to know about that increased risk of suicide. And I'm sorry, it is not compassionate to affirm a kid's confusion. That is not compassion, that is cruelty. I met two young women, Chloe and Katie, early in this campaign, who are in their 20s, now regret getting double mastectomies and a hysterectomy. One of them will never have children. And the fact that we allowed that to happen in this country is barbaric. So I will ban genital mutilation or chemical castration under the age of 18, and parents have absolutely the right.
Would you try to pass a federal law that says parents should have that right?
We are going to require states absolutely have to follow that through.
Governor Burgum,
we
just
stand
to follow
for
up on
parental
this,
rights.
because
yes.
you in your state, you do not have a law that says parents can't be notified, but you want to be president. Would you try to pass a federal law to say parents have that right?
I think this is a state's issue, but I do want to say something, because all night long we've been talking about issues about how it's broken in Washington, and I respect all of the people on the stage here for their 100+ years of public service. Thank you. But the reason why we're not talking about education or health care or safety being a problem in North Dakota is because we have a business leader. I've got more experience as a business leader than I think this whole group combined. I know I've created more jobs than everybody else on stage, thousands of high-paying jobs that have real meaning. So as a business leader, you come in and you treat the taxpayer like a customer. So in North Dakota, instead of fighting with the teachers' unions, we actually created a K-12 coordinating council. Everybody gets in the room and the customer is the student.
But you do understand that this is an issue that many people in America really are concerned about, worried about parents and notification in schools.
Yes, and that's why we have 50 platforms of innovation. That's why we have states. There are certain things the federal government is supposed to do. It's not the Department of Education. That needs to be assembled. We got to move it back to states. Do what we did in North Dakota. Instead of like, oh, here's a choice school and here's an old school, the old way with the teachers union, the kids are trapped. We made every school in North Dakota an innovation school. Every school got out from under the red tape, and the things that help teach the values that we're trying to get, like 4-H, like FFA, like Boy Scouts, they can get credit for all of that stuff in North Dakota. And by the way, North Dakota is now at the top of the median SAT scores in the country right now.
Vice President Pence.
Yeah, I'm sure that's an issue that drives Republican base voters, SAT scores.
LGBTQ+ people is on the rise and intensifying. According to a recent study, members of that community are 9 times more likely to be victims of violent hate crimes. As president, how would you protect this community from violent attacks and discrimination?
Well, as President of the United States, I'll stand up for the safety and the civil liberties of every American, from every background. And I want the American people to know that. But I want to answer the question as well, Dana, that you just asked Doug Burgum. Because by way of full disclosure, Chris, you mentioned the president's situation. My wife isn't a member of the teachers union, but I got to admit, I've been sleeping with a teacher for 38 years. And so full disclosure. Look, education is a state and local function. The state of Indiana had one of the very first school choice programs in the country. And when I was governor of the state of Indiana, we doubled it. And as to your question, Dana, let's be very, very clear. When the Linn-Mar Community Schools in Iowa had a policy where you had to have a permission slip from your parents to get a Tylenol, but you could get a gender transition plan without notifying your parents, I weighed in with a foundation. That's not bad policy, that's crazy. We're going to stand up for the rights of parents, and we're going to pass a federal ban on transgender chemical or surgical surgery anywhere in the country. We've got to protect our kids from this radical gender ideology agenda, and we've got to empower parents at the state level with the ability to choose where their kids go to school, whether it's public, private, parochial, or homeschool. You empower parents parents and our schools will straighten up and reflect our values and focus on the basics faster than you could possibly imagine.
Next subject.
Can I just say one thing?
China is investing. If you talk over everybody,
please.
We lose time. China is investing heavily in their tech companies. $280 billion every year on semiconductor research and development. That is one CHIPS Act per year. Governor DeSantis, you say companies like Google and Meta have too much power. Doesn't going after them give China an edge?
No, I think you look at how our societies develop. They have huge amount of power over our society. They've cracked down on free speech. We're not saying you don't want them to do business, but you want it to be a free market. And right now they're monopolies. But this issue of China, I think, is really going to be fundamental. We have subcontracted out so much of our national needs to the CCP. We rely on them for a whole host of issues. We need to reshore and we need to decouple all those important industries. We need to get that back in the United States. They are our top geopolitical adversary by a country mile. Xi Jinping's got huge ambitions, not only in the Asia Pacific, but as you mentioned earlier, in our region. But ultimately, we've got to beat him on the economy. And so that's what we'll do as President of the United States.
Governor Christie, I wanted to follow up on this because 22% of American workers fear their jobs will be lost to a robot. And you said in the past that the free market is the way to go. Would you retrain workers who lose a job to artificial intelligence, and to do what?
Well, look, what I think artificial intelligence offers us is an extraordinary opportunity to expand well beyond the productivity that we have now, and to have Americans be able to be involved in that revolution, Dana. You know, each time we have shown incredible innovation and progress in this country. What we've done with it is to expand all kinds of new, even unthought of opportunities for folks. Yes, we have to do retraining for folks who lose some of their jobs, and we should be doing that. And we should have more training available both at the county college level and the local level for people to be able to access it. So yes, I would be in favor of that. But this is a much bigger issue than that. We can't be afraid of innovation. America has been the great innovator of this world over the last 250 years, a technological innovator, a manufacturing innovator, and a freedom and governmental innovator. And that's why America has to continue to stand strong in the world, pro-innovation, pro-progress. And I will tell you this, as President of the United States, what I will do is to make sure that every innovator in this country gets the government the hell off its back and out of its pocket so that it can innovate and bring great new inventions to our country that will make everybody's lives better.
Mr. Ramaswamy, TikTok is banned on government-issued devices because of its ties to the Chinese government. Yet you joined TikTok after dinner with boxer and influencer Jake Paul. Should the commander-in-chief be so easily persuaded by an influencer?
So the answer is I have a radical idea for the Republican Party. We need to win elections. And part of how we win elections is reaching the next generation of young Americans where they are. So when I get into office, I've been very clear. Kids under the age of 16 should not be using addictive social media. We're only going to ever get to declaring independence from China, which I favor, if we actually win. So while the Democrats are running rampant, reaching the next generation 3-1, there's exactly one person in the Republican Party which talks a big game about reaching young people, and that's me. And let me level with all of you. I'm the new guy here, and so I know I have to earn your trust. What do you see? You see a young man who's in a bit of a hurry, maybe a little ambitious.
Used car salesman.
Know-it-all, it seems at times. I'm here to tell you, no, I don't know it all. I will listen. I will have the best people, the best and brightest in this country, whatever age they are, advising me. We will be probably many of the people on this stage included. That's how I built my companies. I want to be challenged. I want people who disagree with me. That's what makes America great, because we're not a perfect nation. We're founded on the pursuit of perfection. That is what makes America great. And that is why we will end it once we win this election.
He's like, I'm happy to exploit these young people for their vote, votes and then immediately take away their platform when they win.
This is infuriating because TikTok is one of the most dangerous social media apps that we could have. And what you've got, I honestly, every time I hear you, I feel a little bit dumber for what you say because I can't believe that here you've got a TikTok situation. What they're doing is these 150 million people are on TikTok. That means they can get your contacts, they can get your financial information, they can get your emails, they can get text messages, they can get all of these things.
This is very important for our party.
Exactly what they're doing.
This is very important for our party, and I'm going to say
you've gone and you've helped China make medicines in China, not America. You're now wanting kids to go and get on the social media that's dangerous for all of us. You went and you were in business with the Chinese that gave Hunter Biden $5 million. We can't trust you. We can't trust you. We can't have TikTok in our kids' lives. We need to ban it.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you have 15 seconds.
I think, excuse me.
Let them fight.
You have 15 seconds, Mr. Ramaswamy.
Thank you. I think we would be better served as a Republican Party if we're not sitting here hurling personal insults and actually have a legitimate debate about policy following Reagan's 11th Commandment in his honor. And the answer is that is what actually makes our country strong. And I believe in these people. These are good people on the stage. They disagree, but let's have a legitimate disagreement. That's what I would say.
The party of Donald Trump doesn't want anybody to hurl insults. Gotta love it.
Sir, we will have to cut your mic, and I don't want to do that. I don't. So, Governor DeSantis, let me go to you. Experts say President Putin has ordered assassinations across Europe, cheated on arms control treaties with the U.S., and seeks to work with China to force our decline. President Reagan believed that if you want to prevent a war, you better be prepared to fight one. Today, the Republican Party is at odds over aid to Ukraine. The price tag so far is $76 billion. But is it in our best interest to degrade Russia's military for less than 5% of what we pay annually on defense, especially when there are no U.S. soldiers in the fight?
It's in our interest to end this war, and that's what I will do as president. We are not going to have a blank check. We will not have U.S. troops, and we're going to make the Europeans do what they need to do. But they've sent money to pay bureaucrats' pensions and salaries and funding small businesses halfway around the world. Meanwhile, our own country is being invaded. We don't even have control of our own territory. We have got to defend the American people before we even worry about all these other things. And I watch these guys in Washington, D.C., and they don't care about the American people. They don't care about the fentanyl deaths. They don't care about the communities being overrun because of this border. They don't care about the Mexican drug cartels. So as Commander-in-Chief, I will defend this country's sovereignty.
But it's not a territorial dispute. It's never been a territorial dispute.
And 90% of the resources that we send over to Ukraine is guaranteed. It's a loan. It is not 90% of the money that we send over there is loan. Well, we can talk about this, but at the end of the day, 90% of the money that we send over there is actually in the form of a loan. It's not actually not be paid by Ukraine. It's paid by the NATO, our NATO allies.
So I think it's a good topic.
I think it's a really good topic too. But I will say let's debate the fact that our national vital interest is in degrading the Russian military. By degrading the Russian military, we actually keep our homeland safer, we keep our troops at home, and we all understand Article 5 of NATO.
We have to level with the American people.
I thought you said something about waiting until your turn to talk. So hold on. So at the end of the day, I'm going to finish my. I'll be happy to debate this.
And I'll respond.
I'll look forward to this one right now. So at the end of the day, when you think about the fact that if you want to keep American troops at home, attack on NATO territory would bring us and our troops in. By degrading the Russian military, we reduce, if not eliminate, an attack on NATO territory.
Finish that exchange. We have to level with the American people. We have to level with the American people on this issue. The reality is just because Putin's an evil dictator does not mean that Ukraine is good. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties.
A win
that
for Russia is a win for China.
We're driving Russia.
A win for Russia is a win for China.
Excuse me, Nikki, you'll have a chance chance.
forgot. You like China. That's why
you'll have your chance in just a moment.
Yeah.
The hurling personal insults isn't helping. China is the real enemy, and we're driving Russia further into China's arms. We need a reasonable peace plan to end this, especially this is a country whose president just last week
Vivek,
was
if you
hailing
let
a Nazi in
Putin
his own
have
ranks.
Ukraine, that's a green light to China to take Taiwan.
We need a
peace
reasonable
comes
plan
through
to
strength.
peace. We need a reasonable plan to peace.
Governor Christie.
The Communist Party of China is the real enemy.
Governor Christie, Governor Christie, President Biden's first 2 years have brought China, Russia, and Iran closer together. Are we focused too much on Ukraine and not enough on this threat from the New World Order?
No, they're all connected, Stuart. They're all connected. The Chinese are paying for the Russian war in Ukraine. The Iranians are supplying more sophisticated weapons, and so are the North Koreans now as well, with the encouragement of the Chinese. The naivete on this stage from some of these folks is extraordinary. Look, I understand people want to go and talk to Putin. Guess what? So did George W. Bush. So did Barack Obama. So did Donald Trump. And so did Joe Biden when he said a small invasion wouldn't be so bad. Every one of them has been wrong. And the fact of the matter is, we need to say right now that the Chinese-Russian alliance is something we have to fight against, and we are not going to solve it by going over and cuddling up to Vladimir Putin. Look, Donald Trump said Vladimir Putin was brilliant and a great leader. This is the person who is murdering people in his own country, and now not having enough blood, he's now going to Ukraine to murder innocent civilians and kidnap 20,000 children. And let me tell you, if you think that's where it's going to stop, if we give him any of Ukraine, next will be Poland. This is a guy who said, wait one sec, this is a guy in 1991 who said that was the darkest moment in world history when the Soviet Union fell. Listen, everybody, he wants to put the old band back together, and only America can stop it. Right. And when I'm president, we will.
Governor Burgum, I want to get to Governor Burgum. He hasn't had a chance. I have a question I think you're going to really like, or at least you have experience in it. And we need to talk about America's farmers, because there is a foreign policy connection here. The U.S. and China are in this fierce economic competition. It's hurting American businesses, and there is blowback against American farmers because China then targets them in retaliation. How would you, as president, protect American farmers and ranchers from that kind of retaliation from a foreign government like China?
Well, first of all, we've got the best farmers and ranchers in the world right here in America. If they have a level playing field, they can outcompete anyone in the world. But this is part of the larger issue that we're talking about here, which is we're in a Cold War with China. The Biden administration won't admit that. But we're also in an economic war through what we're doing with agriculture and energy. And we're also in a war with them relative to cyber war. We get attacked every day in North Dakota, every state, every school district, our tribes, all being attacked every day by either China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea. And now we've got a Biden administration whose whole policy is appeasement. They're out there, creating the world, making it less safe. $6 billion they traded for 5 people. They've just now set a price on anyone's head who's a tourist from America, who's a student from America, for kidnapping. If you want more kidnapping, put a price on it. And then they're also helping Iran get to have more closer to nuclear weapon, which pushes all of the Middle East closer to China and Russia. The whole thing is absurd. And then, of course, we're going to give Ukraine to Russia, and then we're going to give Taiwan to China, and think that's a foreign policy. That will make our nation less successful, make us more poor. And at the core of all that is energy policy, because China imports 10 million barrels of oil a day. They're the largest importer in the world, and we've had 4 cabinet members from the Biden administration there this summer, and none of them talked about U.S. energy. The first one to go to each of those countries was Kerry, to talk about the folly of the climate policy, which is making the world less stable. It's empowering dictators. It's not about climate change that we need worried about. It's about the Biden climate policies that are actually the existential threat to America's future.
Thank you.
What dictators are being empowered by clean energy?
Mexico's president called, who supports sending U.S. military into the country, quote, scoundrels. Mexico is the United States' most important trade partner and border security. You say you will send special operations to attack the cartels in Mexico. So, this means boots on the ground, drone strikes,
It means special operations. It's how we deal with our terrorists. And what you need to do is understand that Mexico's not being a good partner if we lost 75,000 Americans last year. Mexico's not being a good partner if they're letting the cartels get away with what they're getting away with. What we will do is we will make sure that we send in our special operations, and we will take out the cartels, we'll take out their operations, we'll take out anything that's doing it. But we're going to go after China, because China is the one sending the fentanyl in the first place. And we will end all normal trade relations until China stops sending fentanyl. And then we'll do the special operations, and we'll get it from both sides. This is where President Trump went wrong. He focused on trade with China. He didn't focus on the fact that they were buying up our farmland. He didn't focus on the fact that they were killing Americans. He didn't focus on the fact that they were stealing $600 billion in intellectual property. He didn't focus on the fact that they put a spy base off our shores in Cuba. They didn't focus enough on the fact that all of our law enforcement drones in America are Chinese, and we've got all these little surveillance cells. We need to start focusing on what keeps Americans safe. That hasn't happened in a long time. As your president, I will make sure every American is safe, and we'll do whatever it takes to make that happen.
All right. I want to get to Senator Scott. You're all auditioning for the job as President of the United States. You want to earn these votes. But the world's problems land in the Oval Office. During the presidential debates in the year 2000, neither Al Gore nor George W. Bush was asked about al-Qaeda. Yet, just 1 year later, al-Qaeda's attack on September 11th claimed nearly 3,000 lives. And the farther we get from September 11th, the closer we are to September 10th. Senator Scott, you have no executive branch experience. What has prepared you to protect the nation from a major man-made national security crisis?
Well, one of the things I've had the good fortune of doing is serving on committees in the United States Senate, like the Senate Armed Services Committee. I'm on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, also on the Finance Committee and the Banking Committee. Talk about addressing the issue of fentanyl. I've written the legislation, passed it through the Banking Committee and the Senate that would freeze the assets and sanction the accounts of the Mexican cartels. There are weapons that we have within the arsenal that I was able to get past 23-0 in the polarizing Senate as it is. I've also understood without question the fact that if you look at the details before 9/11, there was information and intelligence that was available that suggested an attack was coming. Having the right intelligence partners with us is key to making sure that we prevent the next 9/11 from ever happening. Having that experience for the last 10 years is really important in getting the job done.
30 seconds to you, Mr. Pence.
Well, I think you asked a question about executive experience. I think it's vitally important. And I stand before you today as a candidate for president because I think this country's in a lot of trouble. And you hear the fire on the stage tonight. You hear the fire in all of our voices. And it's because Joe Biden has weakened this country at home and abroad. This is a time for those of us that have the experience, the tested experience, and a commitment to the conservative agenda that Ronald Reagan brought forward in this party of a strong national defense, standing with our allies, standing up to our enemies, supporting limited government and traditional values, need to step forward.
Understood.
Because, frankly, our party does face a time for choosing, as I said at the top of this debate, whether we're going to stand on the foundation of that conservative agenda that Ronald Reagan poured, or whether we're going to follow the siren song of populism unmoored to conservative principles. I'm the most experienced, most qualified, and most consistent conservative in this field, and I'm ready to lead America at home and abroad on day one.
Time for choosing to go to a break. Ilya.
We need to go to a commercial break. Reagan built a coalition that lasted decades. Can any of these candidates do the same? We'll take that up when the debate continues.
Okay, so that's the last commercial break. I feel like we have one more segment, so about a half hour left of this debate. I'm very curious to know at this point who you think is winning this debate. So I'm going to put a poll into the chat here, and I want everybody to vote in this poll. To be able to participate in the chat, you just have to subscribe to this channel. So just do a quick subscribe. It does not cost you anything. And this way you'll be able to participate in the poll. So I'm looking to find out who you think is winning. So I'm going to add, there are a few people who I just presume are not winning. I'm probably not going to put Doug Burgum. I am going to put Nikki Haley. I am going to put Chris Christie. I'm going to put Ron DeSantis. I am going to put Vivek Ramaswamy. I feel like those are probably the top 4. I may be wrong. Write in the chat right now if you have a case for a different person, then put that in the chat. But right now, I feel like the top 4 is probably Nikki Haley, Chris Christie, Ron DeSantis, and Vivek. And this is just in terms of who's winning this debate. But if somebody wants to make a case for, if a bunch of you want to make a case for Doug Burgum or Tim Scott, then be my guest. I'm ready to listen. But it looks like right now, in terms of the responses that I'm getting, that it's probably those 4. So I'm going to start this poll here, and let's get to voting. Yes, I have to apologize. I didn't put Mike Pence. I just don't know that there's a lane for Mike Pence in the Hang Mike Pence party. I don't know what it is, just a hunch. Again, to be able to vote in this poll, just make sure to subscribe. It does not cost you anything. Just hit the subscribe button. This way you can participate in the chat. Nikki Haley coming out to a strong lead. We have 5,000 votes already. Nikki Haley in first place at 36%, with Chris Christie at 28%. Make sure to vote. If you're watching right now, there's 112,000 of you. Make sure to vote. Again, doesn't cost you anything. Just hit the subscribe button. This way you can participate in the chat. I really want to know what your votes are. We're up to about 7,000 votes now. Nikki Haley is still in the lead at 36%. All right, we are coming up on almost 9,000 votes right now. Nikki Haley is still in the lead with 37%. Ron DeSantis is in last out of these top 4 with 12%. So Nikki Haley overperforming in this poll as we come up on 10,000 votes. 10,000 votes in the first minute. And yes, everybody who voted does get a sticker. Do not worry. If you haven't yet participated in this poll, very curious to know who you think is winning. We've got 10,000 votes right now. Nikki Haley is in the lead with 37%, then Chris Christie with 28%, Vivek with 22%, Ron DeSantis with 12%, and I did not put them in, Doug Burgum, Tim Scott, and Mike Pence for what I think are obvious reasons. I don't think that they're going to crack that top 10, or top 7 rather, I should say. And by the way, for anybody who hasn't yet subscribed, please subscribe to this channel. It's the best way to support what I do. It's the best way to support these live streams so that I can do these live streams in the future. And I would really appreciate it. All right. Looks like Nikki Haley has taken it with 38% as we close in on 12,000 votes.
Welcome back to the Republican primary debate here at the Reagan Library. We've got a lot more issues to cover and a lot more questions to go. So let's dive right back in. We're here in California, where gas is nearing $6 a gallon. Oil is close to $100 a barrel again. You say, drill, baby, drill. But the courts won't let you. Mr. Ramaswamy, how would you bring down prices without immediate drilling?
Well, look, I think that we do have to run through the courts and get through that administrative state to make sure we're using the natural resources here at home. But here's the other thing that we can do that's easy.
It would take forever, Mr. Ramaswamy.
And it addresses the national debt as well as brings down prices. Put people back to work. We are using taxpayer money to pay people more to stay at home than to go to work. That is wrong. That contributes to our supply chain crisis. It contributes to inflation. That's the easiest way to unlock this economy. And here's the other thing. We have to put the Federal Reserve back in its place. This is an agency that has gone rogue. So in January 2026, when I have the opportunity as their next commander-in-chief, we will have a new chairman of the Federal Reserve who places priority on dollar stability, and then most importantly, send packing 75% of the administrative state, reduce the federal employee headcount by 75%, rescind 50% of unconstitutional federal regulations that are shackling businesses, both large and small. I've offered a very clear, practical plan to do it. That's how we unleash the economy. That's how we revive the integrity of a three-branch constitutional republic rather than this technocracy and aristocracy in the administrative state.
Response, please.
I think one of the signature accomplishments of our administration was in just a few short years, we achieved energy independence. We became a net exporter of energy for the first time in 75 years. But on day one, Joe Biden declared a war on energy, which was no surprise because when Joe Biden ran for president, he said he was going to end fossil fuels. And they've been working overtime to do that ever since. If I'm president of the United States, we're going to open up federal lands. We're going to unleash American energy. We're going to have an all-of-the-above energy strategy. And I have a plan that actually would not only reclaim energy independence, but in 2006, America lost our position as the leading energy producer on Earth. I believe in the next 10 years, with the right policies and experienced leadership in the White House, we can reclaim our role as the leading energy producer on Earth, and that'll grow the American economy for generations to come.
Governor Haley, reaction to that, please.
As the only person who's leading an energy state, could I answer the energy question?
No, Governor Haley.
So, the first thing I'll say is what I saw at the United Nations is energy security is national security. We need a president that understands we have to partner with our producers and make sure that we have their backs. What you don't need is a president who is against energy independence. Ron DeSantis is against fracking. He's against drilling. He's been against, you did it. He always talks about what happens on day one. You better watch out, because what happens on day two is when you're in trouble. Day two in Florida, you banned fracking, you banned offshore drilling, you did it on federal lands, and you took green subsidies that you didn't have to take.
Governor DeSantis, you were mentioned. You have the right to respond. 30 seconds.
Yeah. I just did a plan out in West Texas for American energy dominance. We're going to choose Midland over Moscow. We're going to choose the Marcellus over the Mullahs, and we're going to choose Bakken over Beijing, and we are going to lower your gas prices. We are going to get that job done because it's important for our national security, it's important for jobs, and that's one of the best ways to drive down inflation.
Governor DeSantis, Governor DeSantis,
so listen, the only answer to that, because this is ridiculous.
DeSantis, this question is for you.
Our voters enacted a constitutional amendment
banned it before
that
they
doesn't
voted.
allow. No, it's not true.
You banned it before they voted,
Nikki,
and not only that, fracking wasn't. They didn't vote on fracking.
She's just totally wrong. They voted it in. That's what we did. Onshore, we do it in Florida. We don't have as much as maybe West Texas, but we do it. But that was a constitutional. So that's just wrong. And let's just get real here. My plan will get the job done. We are going to be energy dominant, and that's what's going to happen.
And the voters didn't even vote on fracking, and you banned fracking.
We are moving on with this question for Governor DeSantis. Governor, excuse me, we cannot talk over each other. We must respect each other's time. My apologies for that.
I'm ready, Stuart.
Governor DeSantis, this is your question. The Biden administration is hell-bent on student loan forgiveness, but you say colleges should be on the hook when graduates cannot pay their debt. How does that address the cost of college? The cost of college itself?
Because the colleges are going to have to make a decision. Do we expand the gender studies department, knowing some of those graduates may not have great learning opportunities? No, they're going to focus on the things that really matter. They're going to make different choices. They're going to try to graduate people in 4 years. I also just want to come back to something Dana asked last segment about 9/11, because I was just at the 9/11 memorial with the families. My wife and I were invited. It's very touching to be there, and it affected my life because I ended up joining the military as a result of that. I had been a blue-collar kid, minimum wage in Dunedin, Florida. I ended up getting through Yale and Harvard Law School and somehow came out more conservative than when I went in, and that is not easy to do. Had a lot of opportunities to make money, but I wanted to serve, and I'll never forget coming back on the plane from Iraq, landing in Coronado, California, North Island, and feeling that breeze off the Pacific Ocean and say, you know what? I am lucky to have been born an American, and I think being able to serve, and I'll be the first president elected since 1988 who's actually served overseas in a war, I think that's going to help me as Commander-in-Chief to know how you see these issues and understand that there are real lives at stake for people that wear the uniform.
And we know that Governor Haley's husband is serving right now as well, and we thank him for that. Senator Scott, the national debt has nearly doubled in your time in office. The approval rate for Congress is at a mere 19%. If this were a business, You'd probably all be fired in Washington, but you're here tonight looking for a promotion. In 2013, Governor Haley hired you for the Senate. I'd like you to tell her why you should be promoted to CEO of the nation instead of her.
Certainly. One of the things I'd say is if you look at our national debt of $33 trillion, I would love to have an opportunity to have this country pass a balanced budget amendment. That would constrain the spending in Washington in the same fashion that it does in every state in our nation, number one. Number two, if you want to actually reduce our national debt, you have to grow our economy. In order to grow our economy, you need to create about 10 million jobs to grow our economy at 5%. You can do that in three specific sectors. Number one, the energy sector. We could create between 3 and 3.5 million jobs if we unleashed all of our energy resources. America is we're the richest country if you combine coal, gas, and oil. Why not unleash all of our resources? Number two, we've lost 100,000 factories. 100,000 factories in the last 25 years. If we continued on my Made in America plan, we could bring jobs back to America in a similar fashion that we did when I wrote the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We actually lowered the corporate tax from 35% to 21%, reshored or repatriated $1.7 trillion. We brought the unemployment rates for African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians to the lowest level in the history of the country, and a 70-year low for women.
Governor Haley, would you think you would deserve the promotion over him?
Look, I appreciate Tim. We've known each other a long time, but he's been there 12 years and he hasn't done any of that. He hasn't. They've only given 4 budgets on time in 40 years. He was part of that. He increased the national debt. He voted for the spending.
You voted
he has made sure that the borders are open and they haven't done anything. Look at everything that's happened. 12 years. Where have you been? Where have you been, Tim?
I voted on most of those things.
We've waited and nothing has happened.
Here's what you've done.
Here's the thing that I just find interesting.
Ron, let me finish
All
this.
these guys have said
Here's the
things,
fact.
and I appreciate a lot of the things they're saying.
Nikki
I'm
Haley,
the only one up here who's gotten in the big fights and has delivered big victories for the people of Florida, and that's what it's all about.
Just ask Disney.
When it gets hot in there, when they're shooting arrows at you, are you going to be stand up for parents' rights, to keep the state free? Are you going to be able to do all those things? And in the state of Florida, because of our success, the Democratic Party lies in ruins. We have won the big fights. We have turned our state into a Republican state. People respond to leadership. I've done it while others have talked about it.
CEO, we actually have a CEO of the White House, which is what I think we need. If I may just briefly interject here, we need a zero-based budgeting. That's the way businesses are actually run. Start with zero as the baseline for the budget, and then see what's actually necessary. There isn't a blue state or a red state in this union that does it. The federal government doesn't do it, but successful companies, including the ones that I've built as a CEO, will do it. And I think we need a CEO in the White House to get that done.
Governor Burgum runs a state that way. Yes,
tech
go
questions,
ahead.
you didn't ask the only guy that's been in tech. You have energy questions, you don't ask anything. But I'm just going to say right now, when you say nobody else has done it, the energy plans that have all been announced in the last month by these other folks on stage, we're already doing it in North Dakota. The border plans they're already talking about, we've got troops down at the border flying helicopter missions from North Dakota, from San Diego to the Gulf Coast, trying to stop transnational criminal organizations from inflicting the invasion and the mass casualties in our state. And on the energy policy, we're already doing it. And it's not saying when nobody else done the big fights, North Dakota was leading the charge. We won the battle to get the Biden administration, who was ignoring the law. They were the first administration since Truman that wasn't holding the quarterly required lease sales, and we won that in federal court. WOTUS, we won that in federal court. We're fighting the Biden administration on 20 fronts. To say that nobody's fighting the big fights, just look at the record of what we're doing right now. Energy, economy, national security, I've been talking about it since day one, and now finally good, we're having the conversation about it, but we've got the answer in North Dakota.
Governor Burgum, let's talk big government. This question's for you. Big government keeps getting bigger. 1/5 of all new jobs this year have been created by the government. Governor Burgum, you say you want to shrink the size of government, but it has been a century since any president has done that. Why would you be any different?
Well, because we've done it in North Dakota. When I took office, we shrunk the state budget general fund by 27% in the first 4 months I was in office, and all the trains still running on time. Why? Because you had a business leader that was actually there. Inside of every government job, there's 10 or 20% of mind-numbing, soul-sucking work that even the state and federal employees don't want to do, and you can engineer that work out of the job. That would free up right there 20% of 2 million civilian employees. And by the way, we've got 10 million jobs open. They'd have plenty to do, and they could be generating taxes instead of being paid by taxes. This is totally possible to do it if you have somebody that understands, because having worked in technology for 30 years, everything we had to do was to be better, faster, and cheaper the next day. That's what we can do in government. That's what we're doing in North Dakota.
All right. Governor DeSantis, I want to ask you about something that I think is on a lot of Republicans' minds. This election could come down to less than 50,000 votes in 3 states. Abortion was on the ballot in 6 states in 2022. Republicans lost all of them. Next year, abortion will likely be on the ballot in Arizona. That is a must-win state. Governor DeSantis, how are you going to win over independent, pro-choice voters in Arizona?
Same way we did in Florida. We won the greatest Republican victory in a governor's race in the history of the state, over 1.5 million votes. We were winning places like Miami-Dade County, Palm Beach, that nobody thought was possible because we were leading with purpose and conviction. I reject this idea that pro-lifers are to blame for midterm defeats. I think there's other reasons for that. The former president, he's missing in action tonight. He's had a lot to say about that. He should be here explaining his comments to try to say that pro-life protections are somehow a terrible thing. I want him to look into the eyes and tell people who've been fighting this fight for a long time. My wife and I earlier today were at the gravesite of President and Mrs. Reagan, and I noticed that there was a quote where it says, "Every single person has purpose and worth." We're better off when everybody counts. And I think we should stand for what we believe in. I think we should hold the Democrats accountable for their extremism, supporting abortion all the way up until the moment of birth. That is infanticide, and that is wrong.
Let me ask Governor Christie. Governor Christie.
I don't know that there's a single person left who would actually claim that infanticide is something that actually
Republicans can do that in Arizona if this referendum is on the ballot there.
Yeah, because I did it in New Jersey, Dana. Then
why are all these other states losing?
Well, because they don't have leaders in those states who are leading the fight the way it should be led. And the fact is, look, I was a governor here of the only blue state that's represented up here. This is where the fight is really tough for Republicans. And those are the states that we're going to have to try to win if we're going to win the White House back. And what we did was 14 times, Dana, in 8 years, I vetoed Planned Parenthood funding. 14 times. No one else gets it that much. The Democrats just kept sending it to me, and I kept saying no because I believe in life, but I also believe in states' rights. And I think we fought hard against Roe versus Wade for decades to say that states should make these decisions. So we're going to have those fights in the states. But what you need is a leader who can talk to people and make them understand that if you're pro-life, you have to be pro-life for the entire life, not just the 9 months in the womb. And we talked a lot about fentanyl tonight, and we haven't spoken one moment about treatment. But we need to make sure that for the drug-addicted 16-year-old on the floor of the county lockup, her life is precious too. And we need to be providing treatment to cure this as a disease that it is. If you're pro-life, you got to be pro-life for the entire life. We start talking like that, they're going to do what I did in the blue state, which was get reelected with 61% of the vote and won 70% of independents and 51% of Latinos because I told them the truth from my heart.
Thank you.
Christie left New Jersey in utter ruin for the Republican Party, and there is 2 statewide Republicans in office right now.
Doesn't care about or is being hostile toward them, the Hispanic community. Only Governor DeSantis has translated his campaign into Spanish. How will you reach out to Latino voters?
Well, I promise you that we're going to continue to build bridges to every community in this country. And I'm incredibly proud of that tax cut and tax reform bill. I worked on Capitol Hill to help get that bill passed into law, the largest tax cut in American history. We saw literally the lowest unemployment ever recorded for Hispanic Americans, the lowest unemployment ever recorded for African Americans, 50-year low for women. So I think the President of the United States needs to be a champion for the American dream for every American. It begins with the unborn and the aged and the infirm, and it begins with every ethnic group in this country. And I promise you, if I'm president of the United States, I'll be a champion. I'll be a champion for the American dream, for Hispanic Americans, and for every American. So help me God.
Senator Scott, reaction?
Yes, there's no doubt that if you lead by example, it's the best way to get the job done. If you look at my office in the Senate, my chief of staff is the only Hispanic female chief of staff in the Senate. I hired her because she was the best, highest qualified person we have. What we need are leaders who lead by example. And I will simply say, I would love to finish my conversation with Nikki as it relates to the job that needs to get done. Nikki offered a 10-cent gas tax increase in South Carolina. Talk about someone who has never seen a federal dollar she doesn't like. 10 cents on the gallon in South Carolina. As the UN ambassador, you literally put $50,000 on curtains in a $15 million subsidized location. Next.
You got bad information. First of all, I fought the gas tax in South Carolina multiple times against the establishment.
Just go to YouTube.
Against the establishment.
Just go to YouTube
you want to know what that 10 cent
Yep.
was? When they wouldn't pass the gas tax, the establishment and the companies wanted me to do it so much that I said the only way I will
Here's
pass
what you
it
have to
if
do.
you will
All you
give
have to
us
do.
three.
All you have to do is go watch Nikki Haley on YouTube.
Yes.
If you will give me 3 times the deduction in income tax, then I will look at your gas
So you
tax,
said
which
yes,
is why it didn't
you would
happen.
pass. Exactly, Ron.
Secondly, on the 50 million.
Here is a nice part.
Secondly, on the curtains, do your
Yes.
homework, Tim, because Obama bought those curtains.
Did you
and
send them back?
It's in the press.
Did you send them back?
It's the State Department.
Did you send them back?
Did you send them back? You're the one that works in Congress.
Oh my gosh.
You get it
You
done.
hung them on your curtains.
They were there before I even showed up at the residence. You are scrapping. You are scrapping.
I'm not
Excuse me.
scrapping.
You know I fought
Here's the fact.
taxes.
Here's the fact, though.
I cut taxes. I loaded up our
You wanted a gas tax increase, and then you wanted
At the end of the day,
Are we
intend to go
talking
ahead
about-
like this. In fact,
Are we talking about curtains?
a commercial break. We'll have more of the second Republican debate live from the Reagan Presidential Library in just a few moments.
Okay, so that is our last commercial break. When we come back, they're going to wrap it up, I think just for a few minutes. I believe we have just a few minutes left. I started our final poll in the chat. Who won the debate? So if you're not yet subscribed, subscribe so that you can participate in the poll. But definitely vote in the final poll. I want to know who won this debate. I narrowed it down to the top 4 because you can only put 4 people in. Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, or Chris Christie. So I need to know who won the debate. I left off Tim Scott, Doug Burgum, and Mike Pence because I just don't think that they are going to pull it out on this one. So depending on who you think won, make sure you vote. Make sure you subscribe so that you're able to vote. Also subscribe so that you can support my channel, support live streams like this one. I know there's not a ton of options on YouTube, so I do appreciate it. All right, we are coming up on 8,000 votes already, and it looks like Nikki Haley is running away with it at 39%. The next person, or the next 2 people, are Chris Christie and Vivek Ramaswamy, each tied at 23, and then Ron DeSantis at 16. So if you haven't yet voted, make sure that you vote. You have to subscribe to vote. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. It's also a great way to support this stream and this channel. I do appreciate it. So we'll leave this poll up for just another minute. We're coming up on 10,000 votes in this poll, and it does look like Nikki Haley is the runaway winner here, with Chris Christie now taking a commanding, well, not commanding, but taking a second place lead. All right, coming up on 10,000 votes here. Nikki Haley still at 40%, Christie still at 23%, Vivek at 22%, Ron DeSantis at 15%. That's our real-time final debate poll. And thank you, by the way, for those who've decided to tune in to this debate. I'm curious whether the line that Nikki Haley brought out, which is every time I hear you, I feel a little bit dumber, to Vivek, is a line that helps her My inclination is to say that yes, when you are running in the Republican primary, a party that has largely consolidated around someone like Donald Trump, and you say a line like that every time I hear you, I feel a little bit dumber, I can't help but imagine that that's going to help you with the Republican primary base. Not that I think Nikki Haley is going to peel off any Trump supporters per se, but perhaps those primary voters who aren't supporting Trump right now, she does look more and more like a more viable option than, for example, Chris Christie, who seems to only exist in the context of being able to attack Donald Trump. So I think Nikki Haley is probably making more of an affirmative case for herself than someone like Chris Christie would be. But again, if you haven't yet voted, make sure to vote in the poll. To be able to vote, make sure to subscribe. That is how you're able to vote in these polls. I would like to hear what you have to say. We're at 11,000 votes. Let's get it to 15. This way I feel like that is somewhat more definitive. So if you haven't yet voted in the chat, make sure to hit the subscribe button and then place your vote. Right now, Nikki Haley is in first place with 40%, then Chris Christie with 23%, Vivek with 22%, and finally Ron DeSantis at 15%. I'd also be very curious to see whether Chris Christie's Donald Duck attack is going to stick. Man, I think the saddest thing to come out of our political just world these days is the fact that now we are stuck with nicknames. Grown-ass adults hurling nicknames at each other. It's like these people have finally discovered the concept of alliteration. And so now we have to listen to Donald Duck and Meatball Ron, which isn't even alliterative, but alas, that's where we're at these days. All right, we are coming back. Again, if you're not yet subscribed, please subscribe and vote in this final poll to let me know who won this debate.
And welcome back to the final minutes. I could go another hour, but we only have a few minutes. And candidates, it's now obvious that if you all stay in the race, former President Donald Trump wins the nomination. None of you have indicated that you're dropping out. So, which one of you on stage tonight should be voted off the island? Please use your marker to write your choice on the notepad in front of you. 15 seconds starting now. Of the people on the stage, who should be? I'm absolutely serious.
With all due respect, I mean, we're here. Like, we're happy to debate, but I think that that's disrespectful to my fellow competitors.
Nobody wants to. Nobody wants to.
Come
Let's
on.
do some questions. Let's talk about the future of the country.
Oh, come on.
I want to be clear
Let me
about
ask you this.
if I may.
Let me ask you something.
Yep.
Then if you won't answer that question, let me ask you this one.
Yeah.
What is your mathematical path,
Yes.
Governor DeSantis, in order to try to beat President Trump, who has a commanding and enduring lead in this race?
So polls don't elect presidents. Voters elect presidents.
Right.
And we're going to take the case to the people in these early states. We're going to do it in a state-by-state direction. And why? Because as Reagan said in his day, this is our time for choosing. We are not getting a mulligan on the 2024 election. Republicans have lost 3 straight elections in a row. We were supposed to have a red wave with inflation at 9%. It crashed and burned. Not in Florida, it didn't. We delivered it in Florida. And so we've got to choose right. We've got to win. And we need somebody that's going to be able to serve 2 terms. So in January of 2023, they'll be able to address the nation saying, we turned the economy around, we secured the border, and we fended off the threat from communist China. As your president, I will get that job done.
Governor Christie, I believe I did see you write something. Governor Christie, I believe, excuse me, Governor Christie, I believe I did see you write something on the card. Who was it?
No, but I'll certainly tell you.
Go.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, I think I've been the only one on this stage who's been clear about this. I vote Donald Trump off the island right now. And the reason I vote him off the island,
but any of the people on the stage,
you know what? Every person on this stage has shown the respect for Republican voters to come here to express their views honestly, candidly, and directly, and to take your questions honestly. I have respect for every man and woman on this stage because they've done it. Vivek, put your hand down for a second, would you? I still got time, dude. So chill out. Here, look. This guy has not only divided our party, he's divided families all over this country. He's divided friends all over this country.